Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson, and before I get started with the interview today, I'd like to remind everyone that if you enjoy this, please like and subscribe down below. And also, I got to give a plug to Parker Yole. He was in one of our podcasts earlier. His band, Seas of Malice, has released their second song. Make sure to go and like their Facebook page. Once their Facebook page goes up to 1,000 likes, they're doing free giveaways, so make sure to go and check that out. But today, all the way from New Jersey, we have Scott Kahn. He has been a keyboard founder of Dream Eternal Bliss. He was editor-in-chief, co-founder at musicplayers.com, and he was also a former guitarist at bands such as Beyond Tomorrow, Days Before Tomorrow, and the prog rock band. Scott, welcome on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, obviously, from the intro, we know that you're a man of many, many bands. Why don't you get us started by telling us what inspired you to start pursuing a music career, kind of like what your influences are and what you're up to currently?
Well, what inspired me was probably sometimes people have epiphanies in their life. Mm-hmm. And for me, mine was a long time ago when I was a teenager, and I heard music from a British new wave artist, Gary Newman. Mm-hmm. And he's well known for the song Cars.
Yep, absolutely.
But when I first heard his music, as a kid, I was blown away, and I didn't really know much about synthesizers, and I had no idea how he made that sound. Mm-hmm. But I was like, whatever that is, I need to do that. I knew from that moment in time that I needed to do that. And then I came to learn what keyboards are and synthesizers were. And it's funny, I was just telling a friend of mine earlier today that I actually started out as a drummer because I wanted a keyboard, but years ago they were really, really expensive. Mm-hmm. But I was able to get a good deal on a drum kit. Yeah. So drums became my first instrument. Yeah. And then I just got hooked on the idea of creating music, which...
Yeah. We have a lot of guys that started out as drummers here. What would you say is the biggest thing that you learned from drums that helped you overall in your musical career?
Oh, if everyone could start out as a drummer, bands would be a whole lot tighter. Yeah. Learning how to count and keep time, have rhythm, learn a sense of rhythm. Mm-hmm. Really, learning drums can help you with every other instrument, especially if you play with other people.
Yeah. I've always said on this show that drums are probably the most undervalued and underrated part of the band. They always keep the beat down. If they fail on a live show, then the band fails. They have so much pressure on them, and really it's a very undervalued position. But it also says that you went to become a guitar player. How did that start? Did you just all of a sudden say, hey, I don't want to play these drums anymore, let me just start guitar? How'd that work?
Well, like I said, I started out on the drums, mm-hmm. and then about a year later, I had saved up enough money to get my first keyboard, mm-hmm. picked one up used, and that opened up, melodic songwriting in ways that drumming didn't, mm-hmm. because that was percussive. Mm-hmm. And, a year or two into that, I was like, I'm not content with just keyboards. Yeah. And so I gravitated towards guitar, and I found myself really loving that. And at that point, I decided, you know what, I've got to I've got to put the drums on hold a little bit. Stop taking lessons there because I need to take lessons on guitar and learn that better. Mm-hmm. And so I just sort of shifted focus where the keyboards, at least with guitar and keyboards, the theory is all the same. Mm-hmm. Everything I learned for guitar, I could apply to what I did on keyboards and vice versa. And so it just sort of went that way. And over the years, sometimes I was a keyboard player in bands, sometimes I became a guitar player in bands. But most of my years were spent playing guitar. Yeah.
What would you say is the most, or the biggest misconception when it comes to keyboard players?
The biggest misconception, probably that they're just providing filler, mm-hmm. To the sound. Yeah. Really, the keyboard when done right, is really the orchestra in your band. They're adding various layers. They're really enhancing the dynamics of the song and the performance. They also give, good keyboard playing gives the guitarist room to branch out and do things that he can't do on his own, especially if there's only one guitar player in the band. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How would you say, especially you mentioned that you started to like Gary Newman, so you've been back a ways. How would you say the keyboard has evolved and changed over the past years since you started playing it?
Well, the technology has changed significantly. First, in the early days, it was all physical keyboards and synthesizers. Then we had rack modules that you played remotely from those keyboards. Then it evolved. Then it all moved on to the computer, where now you had virtual representations and recreations of those keyboards in software. So one evolutionary aspect happened in the keyboards themselves, moving into the box, moving into the computer. Now then, sampling evolved tremendously. In the early days, it was a very complex technical thing that was also very expensive. With the computer, it became really, really easy to sample sounds and have direct access to play them back, especially new controllers that let you basically hit buttons to generate samples without even knowing anything about playing keyboards. So it just continues to, so physically the technology has evolved tremendously, and musically, obviously, there was no EDM genre, 20 years ago. The fact that you can sit down with a laptop and create a song without actually playing an instrument, that's a massive evolutionary process.
Oh yeah, absolutely. When you're forming your these bands, or when you're even in like your first band, what is the biggest struggle that you've had early on, and how did you guys overcome it?
Well, when you're younger, especially in particular, ego is the biggest problem I think you find in bands. Basically, players or singers or someone in the band who thinks they are the most important part of the band. And sometimes that translates into them wanting to play too much, too often, or too loud, or all of the above. Really, as you gain experience and maturity in your music playing, you become a lot more aware of playing for the song instead of playing for yourself. And that means you really have to enjoy the music you're a part of, because like I can be very happy being on stage in a song where I'm only playing a little bit here and there. I don't have to play every piece of every song to enjoy it, because we're making good music. Just like an orchestra, you've got a player who's just sitting there and just comes in for a few measures, here and there, throughout the piece. And it's the same way when you're in a rock band. If you feel like you have to be heard all the time, you're basically creating a band whose music has no dynamics.
Yeah. Well, you've obviously had experience with multiple instruments when it comes to being in a band. How would you say having that experience has really helped you musically, whether it comes to lyrically or whether it comes to melody? Has it overall benefited you a lot, or has it not really changed as much?
Playing with as many people as you can has a lot of benefits. It really helps you. It helps you grow musically and artistically, but it can also slow down your overall journey if you're trying to create a specific kind of musical art. And some of that depends on if you're writing the music or if you're happy playing other people's music. And you're either taking an active role in the songwriting process, or you just enjoy creating your parts, your contribution to the song.
When you first started out, we always talk about how bands choose their genre, kind of choose their niche of what type of music that they want to play. When you were first starting out, was there ever a discussion as to like what genre you wanted to play, or was there always a set thing in your mind where you're like, I want to play this type of music?
I think for me, there was always a set idea of what I didn't want to play. I didn't want to play reggae. I didn't want to play blues. I knew I wanted to play stuff that was related to pop, related to rock, related to metal. As long as it had good melody, that was sort of what would drive my decisions.
Yeah. One of the big questions that I always like to ask guests on here, and we have a wide variety of opinions on this, is obviously rock music. You came of age in a time when rock music was just absolutely probably the most popular thing. I mean, MTV, everything, all those hair metal bands, all the rock and roll. I mean, it was unbelievable how popular it was. But then once we got into the 90s, it kind of simmered down a little bit, late 90s, and now we're at an age where rock music has not died, but it's very, 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 very close to it, because there's not that much commercial success when it comes to rock music. In your opinion, what is one of the big causes you think of the decline of rock music, and then all those type of subgenres in general?
I think that's something pretty easy to identify, and I see that with my work as the editor-in-chief of musicplayers.com. And I think that ties really strongly into the lack of music education in schools.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also a big reason why rock music has always lived on in other countries outside of the United States. It's really an American phenomenon.
Yeah.
In fact, if you go to Europe, if you go to Japan, people are still buying physical CDs, and they're still worshiping, hair bands.
Mm-hmm.
The bands that got their start in the '80s and that are still making a career out of it today, though not a lot in the United States.
Yeah.
And the reason I bring this up is, back during the when I grew up in the '80s, the people who became guitar heroes, you would read stories that these guys were sitting in their room practicing 6 or 7 or 8 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
No kid has the patience for that today.
Yeah.
And so, very few do. Some do, but there's, back when everybody learned instruments and people learned orchestral instruments and band instruments in school, they learned an appreciation for technical music, what it meant to create music that had some level of complexity to it. And so when you listen to pop music or rock music, you naturally noticed and appreciated music that was more evolved and had more complexity to it and more layers and more orchestration. And so you naturally leaned towards enjoying that.
Mm-hmm.
You take away all of that learning, and suddenly that music becomes a little too technical and too cerebral and too much to think about. And so you fall back on the stuff that's a lot easier to absorb and easier to digest. Yeah. And that's simpler pop stuff.
Yeah. I also believe, too, that the rise of hip-hop really played a huge role in it, too, because you see hip-hop stars now, and they're acting like they have the lifestyle kind of what rock stars in like the 80s and early 90s had, where it was just the partying and just talking about money and girls. That's how it was. They kind of took over the mantle. So that rock, I definitely agree with you, too, that we need to have more music education in schools, and we need to teach. I mean, that's when they talk about funding cuts for schools. That's usually one of the first things that goes, and it's unfortunate. But I do appreciate games like when I was in the age when Guitar Hero came out. I was like in middle school, and that was a huge thing that kind of, I think, revitalized a lot of popularity in rock music because it was majority a rock game. So I do think that they need to have more stuff like that to kind of get the younger kids' generation, because when I was playing on Guitar Hero, I was like, that introduced me to a lot of the music that I like today, where I was like, oh, this music isn't so bad. So we definitely need to do something like that when it comes to, bring back the genre to somewhat prominence. And I think it's sort of making a comeback with some of these newer bands that are kind of slowly making it, but we'll have to see how it goes. But your band Dream Eternal Bliss, how did that come up?
Well, Dream Eternal Bliss came up just because I had been playing progressive rock music for a long time. And again, I was playing music that appealed to people who appreciated more evolved rock music and melodic music. And sure enough, we had an even larger fan base in Europe than necessarily here. And again, that ties in with the whole appreciation of classical music, I think. But I'd been playing guitar in the bands for a long time, and I had been recording keyboards on every record I'd been a part of as well. And I just realized, I'd like to take a break from the guitar and focus on my keyboard playing, sort of get back to my roots, and embrace sort of the keyboard era that I loved at the start, and sort of combine it with how I've evolved as a progressive rock musician, but do something that really catches the mainstream listener, has a commercial pop appeal. But if you've got an ear for music, you'll listen and you notice that what's going on underneath the surface is actually quite involved.
Yeah. Now, we talked a little bit before we started recording this, and you said that you had a good deal of input when it comes lyrically and when it comes melody-wise in the band. When you're talking about writing a song that is a pop song that you know is probably going to get more mainstream, is there a certain formula that you have when it comes to writing a pop song?
I think the only formula, I try to stay away from formulas, and you have to write sort of what's being true to yourself. And so in the case of formulas, the only formula I suppose I stick to is that you need to get to the chorus fast, and you can't have long, extended musical introductions. As much as I love those from my days playing progressive rock, the pop music listener is used to a certain sense of immediacy, and so with that in mind, if you're writing a song that you envision being a single to catch the audience, to catch a new listener, you sort of need to get right to the singing. Introduce that vocal hook right from the beginning, and get to a catchy chorus sooner rather than later.
Yeah, one thing that I've realized, I have a plethora of. I'm a huge classic rock fan. 70s, 80s, 90s. I live for that stuff way more than any other musical genre, and I have all of it on my iPhone. But I realize either when I'm working out or when I'm just listening to that music, that almost every song, I'd say 90% of them, they have their catch or their chorus within 40 to 50 seconds of the song starting. So I've kind of noticed that as kind of one of the go-tos when you're writing a pop song, is that, yes, you're right, you got to have it on early just so that the audience might not lose interest. And when you're writing lyrics, what inspires you lyrically? Is it day-to-day stuff, or is it maybe like stuff you hear on the news? Or we've asked this to everyone, and only one person has said that it's partially true. There's always that music trope in like movies where like the dude's asleep and then he has a dream of like the perfect lyric to like write the perfect song, and then he wakes up and he's like, oh my God, I got to write that down. Has that ever happened to you?
No, No, I have woken up thinking, oh my God, what was that amazing song idea I had as I was falling asleep, and I was too tired to get up and turn on my phone, and sometimes I've got some friends that they'll sing an idea into their cell phone as soon as it hits them. If the idea hits me, after midnight, it's I tell myself, if it's a good enough idea, I'll remember it the next day, and if I don't remember it, it wasn't that great.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you're writing your lyrics, is there a certain theme that you like to explore, or do you choose like multiple themes? How does that work?
Okay. It really depends on the genre. In the progressive rock music that I was doing, we would do concept albums. All of the songs would be tied to a theme that runs throughout the record. In the pop and modern rock space, we really don't stick to one constant theme, though I find most of the songs tend to center around people and their relationships to each other, to themselves, to the living, to the dead. Politics definitely, the political climate definitely inspires lyrics, but I think a key to strong songwriting is to not be too literal in what you're saying. So, for example, in Days Before Tomorrow, one of the songs on our record was a political protest about during years ago, during the Iraq War. A lot of people don't realize that the Bush administration censored the American press.
Oh, yeah.
They were restricted from publishing photographs of fallen soldiers. And at the time, I actually worked as a photojournalist.
Oh, wow.
And this totally flew in the face of everything I believed in, especially when people were trying to show the dignity with which our fallen soldiers were taken care of.
Absolutely.
But rather than writing a song that says, Bush, you're an asshole, this is wrong, it was actually written as a jaded love song.
Oh.
And so lyrically, you could interpret what you're hearing as the failure of a relationship where one person in the relationship is not allowed to say what's on their mind. But what it's actually about is a whole political commentary on how the press is not allowed to say what they want. And so I love when you can write your lyrics in such a way that you and I can interpret it differently.
Yeah. And
just like classic songs, like for years there was this debate over Puff the Magic Dragon.
Yep.
All these people who think it's this song about getting high. I've met Peter Tork from Peter, Paul and Mary.
Wow.
And I remember hearing him speak about it. He's like, I swear to God, we just thought it was a goofy song. Like they were not deliberately trying to write some drug song.
Yeah.
But when you write lyrics that are open-ended, it just opens up the world for people to explore them and think about them, debate them, see how they internalize them, for themselves.
I always think, one of the biggest, probably one of the most popular misconceptions in music, we hear it every single 4th of July, is Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA. Everyone thinks that that's like the great like pro-American song or whatever, when deep down it's actually a protest song. And I always, think that music, if you can write a song that can be both interpreted as something that it's not, you can also reach a wider audience. But when when you're writing a song, how does the title come in? Do you have the title of the song? Do you know that before you write down the lyrics, or is it after the lyrics where you're kind of sifting through them and thinking, what can I do for a title for this?
So song titles are pretty easy because usually they come out of an important hook from the chorus. Now, not always. And in fact, in alternative rock, very commonly the song title did not appear in the chorus, but might have been taken from a line in the song.
Yeah.
I think the bigger challenge is album titles. In the case of a song, it's usually something from the chorus that comes up pretty easily. But then once you have the collection of songs and you think about, well, what are we going to call this record? That's where it becomes a little more involved. Do we name it after one of the songs? Or what I like to do is take a line from one of the lyrics somewhere in the record that seems to convey the vibe of what you're going for.
So having the background as being a photojournalist as well, has that helped you when it comes to kind of knowing how to promote the bands that you're in or kind of promote your businesses? Because, photojournalist, that's one of the keys that you need to be in a band. You need to have connections like that. Has that overall helped you think? No,
I think the biggest thing is understanding how to use social media. Even more than the photojournalism. Knowing how to reach an audience on social media and keep them engaged. And that's the biggest thing today. In fact, one of the problems with a lot of older musicians who've been doing it for a long time, if they have not evolved and paid attention to the changes, they just think everything about the industry fell apart, and they don't. And what's happened is they just no longer understand how to connect with their fans. The music listener is online. You have to know how to find them. Have to know how to publish the right kind of message that they can easily digest and that interests and motivates them.
Yeah. So, obviously, the big question that we always like to ask here is performing live. We've had, I think you're episode 24 now, but when you're performing live, we always like to ask the people on here, what's that high kind of like, what's that thrill? A lot of people just describe it as more potent than any drug you could ever take. Just knowing, especially that people are enjoying your music and that you've practiced it a million times and then you finally get to play it for them. What's that feeling like for you specifically?
Well, it's a lot like public speaking. People can be really terrified of it. And in the case of public speaking, many people find good ways to avoid doing it if they're not into that. But when you're in a band and you're on stage, it just like being in theater, it's you can be nervous as hell. You can be scared, but you have to go out there. You have to do it. And there is nothing to hide behind. Unless you're a drummer, you get to hide. And sometimes actually behind the keyboards, you feel a little bit less pressure. Like, okay, they can't see all of me. But the reality is they still see your face, and that's where you're going to show your fear anyway. So it's maybe a false sense of security. That you can hold on to the keyboards if you're nervous.
Do you have any traditions that you do before shows? Kind of, we've had guys in here that say we always drink 2 shots of this certain drink, or we always do stretches or anything like that. Is there kind of a prep that you go through before going on the stage?
I think my prep is just maybe quickly running through a couple of my musical parts before getting on stage, just because on stage really it's more about muscle memory than mental memory. Because especially when you're nervous, and almost everybody gets nervous on stage. And there are some extremely famous artists who say to this day they still get totally frightened every night before they get out on stage.
I live within about 10 miles of where Prince used to live before he died, and I remember that was a big thing, that why he took all those pills was because he'd always get nervous when he'd go on stage, so he took all those things. But so that's, I just find it interesting because after guys like that who have performed thousands upon thousands of shows, that they still get nervous when going out there. It just really shows sometimes the pressure that they can put on. Do you ever what do you like to do personally to kind of alleviate the pressure that you might be feeling before you go on stage? Or is it one of those things where once you get on the stage, you're kind of calmed down a little bit more, where you're like, okay, we're doing this? I
I find, I try and have some kind of meditative moment, to myself, before things start. It might be on stage before the curtains go up or before the lights go on, where I'm just sort of in my own space, just taking a deep breath, trying to relax myself. It's and then probably about halfway into your first song is, I think, when things just sort of really loosen up.
Yeah.
And but you're definitely during the first song also, depending on the show, they might still be wrestling with the sound system, trying to get things dialed in, and so circumstances beyond your control are forcing you to be uncomfortable because you're not hearing and feeling and experiencing things the right way yet.
Yeah. When making a set list for the show, is there any reason to where you place certain songs, or do you just kind of like just to throw them on and then just decide like through trial and error what works best, or is there like a method between where you put your songs in a set list?
Oh, there's a definite method. It's a rhythm. It is a performance, and a performance should have highs and lows, peaks and valleys.
Yeah.
So there's definitely some thought to starting out in a way that engages your audience, keeps them feeling a certain way, then maybe giving them a little breather where it slows down a little. Then maybe you go into a more expansive, more lengthier melodic piece, then ramp it back up. Then figure out a way to close with a strong movement, a strong performance that makes people want more.
Yeah.
So you've really got all of that.
Does that come from a lot of trial and error, or when you're writing down the music, you kind of have a good idea of where it would place in the set list?
No, we spend a lot of time after we come up with a set list. Like if we know a particular show is coming up and we have a 1-hour show, so we put together a set list the way we think it'll work, and then we rehearse the songs for the next couple of rehearsals in that set order, and we see how it feels. And then we realize, what, it doesn't really feel good going from this song to that song. Let's switch these around.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes there are technical considerations that go into it, where it could be maybe we have 2 songs that use an alternate tuning on the guitar. Well, maybe 2 of the songs have a drop D tuning or an open G. Well, it makes a lot of sense performance-wise to put those songs together, so that we don't have to lose some time for an instrument change.
Yeah.
So sometimes you'll have to take the physical concern and mix it and find a way to make that work with the whole flow of the set.
So you perform shows all over the country. Is there any region or any specific area in particular that is your favorite when it comes to performing?
Yeah, I would probably say Los Angeles.
Yeah.
It's LA is really the town, and Hollywood in particular. It's really the place that loves rock music, and people go out to hear it, and they want to hear it, and the venues are built to support live music, and they've got great sound systems, and they've got great engineers who really work to make things sound their best. Here in the New York metropolitan area, people think, New York City must have this great music scene. Well, there are a ton of challenges and hassles and headaches related to playing in the New York area.
Oh yeah.
And one of the issues is half of the places you play were never designed to accommodate bands.
Yeah.
And so I remember performing at the legendary CBGB's. I remember performing at CBGB's before it was shut down.
Oh wow.
And for people not from the New York area, they think of the legend of this place in the Village, CBGB's, and all of the famous bands that were on the stage. The actual experience of it is that I'm playing guitar standing on stage right, and 5 feet away from me is the door to the men's room. And guys are just walking right in front of you to just go into the men's room, right in front of you, while you're trying to be up there rocking out.
Jeez.
And that was the experience of CBGB's.
Wow.
So, yeah. But
what was your first? We always love to hear like first concert stories. What was your first ever performance live, and how did it go?
Ooh, my first real concert experience was probably up in the San Francisco Bay Area, where I lived for 10 years. And actually, yes, it was. And I was playing keyboards in in a pop R&B band, which was interesting because we were booked to open for a classic hard rock band at the time, and I definitely remember being very nervous. I was the youngest one in the band by a big margin. I'd gotten myself connected with some older musicians, older than me, and they weren't old, but this was when I was just like 21, and they were all seasoned, experienced pros, and for me, I was just scared off my ass. How am I going to get through this? But you know what? You take that first step, and then you realize, hey, okay, this works. I get it. And you do it some more, and then eventually you understand how it's all supposed to work. But none of that ever takes away the nerves. I mean, you always have nerves. Stepping out in front of a new audience. You don't know how how are they going to respond.
Yeah. So now we're going to go to the part of the podcast where we do the Inside the Actors Studio-esque questions. This is based on audience response. This is our favorite part of the podcast. I'll ask you 5 questions, and then I have them tallied up, and then once we get to, I think, the 50th episode, then I'll make a special episode where I tally up all the rankings and see what thing has gotten the most votes, and then we'll have winners, and we'll give away stuff and all that jazz. So the first question is, out of all the songs that have ever been written in the history of music, what is one song that you personally wish you'd come up with yourself?
Oh, it's funny. I have this on my mind because someone recently asked me, what do you think are some of the greatest lyrics ever written? And it made me think of a classic song called Strength from The Alarm. Now, you might recognize it if you heard it, but I to this day, it gives me chills when I hear him sing, one of the verses that goes, "Someone write me a letter. I need to know that I'm still alive. Someone give me a telephone call. I need to hear a human sound. Someone open up a door and let me out of this place. I've been caged up for oh so long, I don't know whether I'm living or dying." I mean,
yeah, heavy stuff. Yeah, that's unbelievable. So, any band or musician in particular, dead or alive, you can pick either one. It doesn't matter. If you could perform one show with any musician, who would it be and why?
Well, I guess that's sort of like if I could join someone else's band, which group would it be?
Yeah.
And there are 2 of them that I'd be equally happy, to join: Tears for Fears or Duran Duran.
Yes.
Both of whom are still doing it 40 years into their career.
Absolutely.
And these are bands that just have really melodic music with lots of rich layers. I would be happy playing either keyboards or guitar. If either of you guys are watching this podcast, I'll take either spot with you guys. Yeah,
Shout and Head Over Heels are some of my favorite songs ever, and then Duran Duran just has so many songs I can't even begin to name all that stuff. They are definitely some of those bands that are just still out there and kicking. I mean, they're going to be kind of like the Rolling Stones soon, but who knows how long the Rolling Stones are going to last. But Third question is, out of all the venues on the planet, if you had your option to play at any one of them, where would it be and why?
Well, I've played some really nice venues in my time so far, but I'd say,
what would you say is the most memorable venue that you've played at?
Well, it's funny. The most memorable venue was probably playing at the Avalon Theater in Hollywood, performing at the Los Angeles Music Awards.
Wow.
Days Before Tomorrow, our record in 2009 won Record of the Year in those awards, and we were invited out to the show.
Wow.
And that was really memorable because it was the largest stage I had played at that time, and it was larger than New York City's Irving Plaza, which is a place that I would really like to play.
Okay.
But my favorite show which was actually in Hollywood, was actually performing at the Whiskey.
Ooh.
Or the Whiskey A Go Go, which is another classic legendary LA club. And it was just a great example of how, venues that are purpose built to have good music. Just everything about performing there, from getting ready to the sound quality to the stage experience to the audience, was just one of those shows where you get off and it's like, wow, this is how it's supposed to feel all the time.
Yeah. My venue personally, I mentioned this like 100 times, but Slane Castle in Ireland
Oh,
where they have, yeah, just that's the scenery is just so beautiful, and I always watch videos of artists performing there, and I was like, oh my god, yeah, if I had a chance, I'd play there. I don't have any musical talent whatsoever. I play drums, not even in a band. I'll just do the thing where if I get angry, I'll just go and just bash the drums a little bit and just take it out. But when this isn't going to be one of the questions, but I was going to ask, since you have been in the Hollywood area a lot, what is the most starstruck you've ever been when meeting a person? Has there ever been a person where you meet them and you're just like, oh my god, I can't believe that I just met them?
No, I fortunately, because my day job, I made part of being in the music industry with musicplayers.com.
Yeah.
I've had the opportunity to interview many of my heroes.
That's awesome.
Many of my music idols.
Yeah.
So I really don't get starstruck. In fact, sometimes I find it odd or awkward when people I'm with, when I introduce them to people that are famous, that to me they're contemporaries. I really see, rock stars are very different than celebrities.
Yeah.
And there's a huge difference, and now some pop stars, it's like when they enter the celebrity level, they become a different kind of person, and their world changes, and the way people interact with them really change.
Yeah.
But for the most part, rock stars are musicians. They're actually pretty normal people who are happy to talk to you if you don't act, really crazy.
Yeah.
So I find it fascinating when people react as if the people that I happen to be friendly with are celebrities, when to me they're just other musicians. The only difference is they've sold more records and they get to do this and nothing else for a living.
Absolutely. That's one thing I found doing these podcasts too. Like, I thought I'd get starstruck by some of the people that I've had, because I've had some people that are like slowly getting up there in the musically, but I was like, no, they're just normal guys. They're not like celebrities. They just act normal, and I think that's one of the big things that people don't realize. But going back to our questions, number 4, what is a guilty pleasure song that most people would not think that you would enjoy?
Well, I like ABBA.
Oh, okay.
That might be a guilty pleasure.
I was just listening to ABBA literally yesterday, because they have so many good songs. It's underrated. I was listening to SOS, which is probably my favorite song of theirs. But
okay, you just mentioned the one song that I've thought a lot about doing a remake of. Actually.
Oh wow, yeah.
Yeah.
If you do that, you are sending that remake to me, and I will plug that on this thing, because it's one of those. Yeah, it's just one of those songs. And then Voulez-Vous is another good one, and then like Dancing Queen and Mamma Mia. That's all that. I never saw Mamma Mia. I have no intention of seeing it. They probably just ruined it with all these actors doing the voices of ABBA. That's just ridiculous. But yeah, definitely, yeah, ABBA. We did our winner still to this day. Someone said "I Want It That Way" by Backstreet Boys, and he was like a heavy metal guy, so I mean he still takes the cake. But last question, guilty pleasure genre.
I don't have one, because I listen to everything from metal to pop.
Yeah.
So maybe guilty pleasure would be that I still like some of the 80s rap.
Oh yeah.
Music that I can't stand typical rap music of today, but back in the 80s it still had a lot of instrumentation.
Oh yeah.
And music and melody in there, and lyrics that were little more involved.
Yeah, last night when I was working out, I was listening to Grandmaster Flash with The Message. Yeah, that's one of the songs that I love. I mean, and those songs really like describe nowadays. Now they're rapping so fast, or they're talking so different that you can barely understand what they're saying. But back then, they really had like messages to their lyrics, and they were talking about issues that they were facing in daily life. So I think that's what really helped it take off. But why don't you tell us a little bit about when you started on musicplayers.com, kind of how that got started off?
Well. The key to having a lifelong career as a musician is to have another career that pays the bills.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I've always loved so many different things. Technology was a big part of my life, and I worked in Silicon Valley.
Wow.
For cool tech startup companies by day, while I was playing in bands in the Bay Area by night.
Wow.
And so I was always involved in technology, and because I'm a creative person, I always liked writing, whether I'm writing music or writing prose or writing nonfiction. And I started writing for computer industry magazines while I was in Silicon Valley. So now we were tying together my love of technology and my creative, enjoyment of writing.
Mm-hmm.
Then you throw in my passion for music, and a couple of years later, I realized, what? How can I put all of this together? And that led to my creating musicplayers.com, an online magazine whose audience is primarily musicians.
Yeah.
And it lets me sort of combine, all of those things that I love.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'll definitely leave a link to the website down below because that's what we do. I mean, we love this is basically like a musical podcast that we love just talk music. But what was the one thing that you were surprised about when it came to starting the website? Was there any like trial and error that you didn't expect would happen?
Didn't expect legal challenges from competitors who didn't like you doing what you were doing.
How would they get after you though if you were just like interviewing people or doing how would that work?
Well, there was a trademark dispute over the name. Because there's another website with a very similar name.
Mm-hmm.
And they thought they could just scare me away.
Mm-hmm.
I actually had to get lawyers who looked up the trademark references and found that they had attempted multiple times to trademark, the words unsuccessfully, and they were just trying to scare me and, send them a letter, said, here's the evidence that, you don't have any claim to this. This is just, there's nothing proprietary about the name Music Players.
Mm-hmm.
So leave us alone.
Yeah.
So that was, the getting started scare.
Mm-hmm.
After that, it was, really, we came along at a good time when people were looking for more content online because the print publishing world has undergone tremendous pain over the past decade. Mm-hmm. Publishing is in really dire straits. Mm-hmm. Publishers go out of business, every month. It's really hard to make a living printing, a magazine.
Yeah.
And even though I enjoy reading physical magazines, I knew when I started this that the future for publishing was online. Mm-hmm. And so the challenge was, being able to build something that could grow and scale, as more and more people came to it.
What did you use basically to help get yourself more exposure? Were there any techniques that you used when it came to marketing wise?
Well, I'd say the real big thing with all web-based content is getting people to share it. Mm-hmm. Create content that people are interested in, mm-hmm. and make sure that the people who would be interested know about it. Mm-hmm. If you're writing about a particular product, make sure the manufacturer is not just aware of it, but also that they're doing their part to tell their audience about what you've done.
Yeah.
If you interview an artist, make sure that artist is also telling his or her fans,
absolutely,
hey, check out this feature story they just did with us. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just like this podcast. Mm-hmm. I'm going, one of the things that's going to help you is me letting my audience know, hey, I was just on your podcast.
Yeah.
And here's the link.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the one thing I've learned too. It's just about like connections and kind of getting the word out, and hopefully, I mean, the internet, as much as it gets ripped on, as much as social media gets ripped on with people just constantly looking on their phones, and just, I do agree that they have lost sort of a sense of touch of just like person-to-person communication, but it does have its benefits, especially when it comes to businesses. So many businesses, I mean, think about 10 years ago, there would be no way that we'd be able to do this podcast with technology. It's opened the doors for so many new things. What does it look like what does the future look like for you? Like in the next 12 months, what are your goals musically, and even as like with your website, do you have any goals set in mind?
Yes. Well, we're just a few weeks away from being done with the next record, mm-hmm. for Dream Eternal Bliss. So this year is going to really be a big make or break year for the band. Mm-hmm. It's we have one EP out, then we released a single that featured our new singer. Now she's on a full-length record. Really getting the world to embrace the new record is what's either going to take us to the next level or not. Yeah. So that's a real big goal is promoting the heck out of that new record.
Yeah. Where can people find your music? Do you have it on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or I know you have a Facebook page, and I'll leave a link for that, but where else can they find your music?
Oh yeah. You really hit it. I mean, Dream Eternal Bliss is on Spotify, on Pandora, in the iTunes store, on Amazon, on cdbaby.com, mm-hmm. All of the on Reverb Nation, really all of the places that that fans would go to find new music, they will find Dream Eternal Bliss.
All right.
And we have our own web, and dreameternalbliss.com is sort of the landing page where from there you can find everything.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I'll definitely leave links below for that. And we have 2 final questions to ask. What would you say to someone who is starting out their band or just thinking about starting out music? What do you think is the best piece of advice that you could give them?
Be open to feedback from experienced artists.
Mm-hmm.
Don't assume you know best. Sometimes I know for myself, in your youth, you think you're infallible. But there are people who do know some things that if they offered genuine advice, it might be worth listening to. So that's one piece of advice. And kind of related to that, enlist the help of people who can help you. Don't think you can do it all for yourself. If you think, we can just record our album for ourselves in our bedroom and we can make it sound as good as everything else, well, you probably can't. You can do some of it, but not all of it. Yeah. So bring in people to help where they can make a difference.
Yeah. And if you could talk to yourself like 10, 20, doesn't matter, years back, what would be the best piece of advice that you think you could give your younger self when it comes to music?
Have more perseverance to stick it out with one group. Mm-hmm. A lot of times people really think the grass is greener somewhere else. Mm-hmm. It takes a long time to get a group to really gel and evolve and grow. Yeah. Not every band has an immediate hit that instantly launches them to stardom. Mm-hmm. The process from getting your group together to having your first record done takes about a year. And what people don't realize is after that first record is made, that's when the hard work starts. That's not when the hard work ends. Yeah. That making the art is the easy part because that's your passion. Mm-hmm. The hard work is taking that art that you've now created, bringing it to people, getting the shows, getting the exposure for the music. And a lot of people think, well, I just wanted to be playing out months ago and we're just not playing enough gigs. Well, it's a big process. And so what happens is the young, inexperienced musician thinks, well, you know what? I'll get further faster if I quit this and join these other guys that appear to be further along. Mm-hmm. Only they do that, it derails the original band that now gets reset, having to find some new member to replace the guy. And then the person moved on to that other band that isn't really as far along as he thought. Yeah. And because they're just replacing the last guy who did the same thing to them. And so there is no shortcut to success.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll get a lucky break, but most people don't get the lucky break. Mm-hmm. It takes time to build. And so have the patience, have the commitment to stick with something if you think the music is right, if you think the people are right, if the vision is right. Take the time to see it through, and that can take a couple of years. Yeah. And it'll be worth it.
Yeah. So the last thing we always like to discuss here, and I mean, you put it perfectly. One of the best qualities I think that someone can have is perseverance and kind of the ability to just take all the negative and just kind of turn the other cheek and just keep on keeping on even when times are tough. I find that especially for musicians, this is especially important because starting off that you're not going to be famous. I mean, probably like 1/1000% of people will get famous within like their first month just because they'll get lucky with some song and they'll know some guy. But perseverance is so key to musicians. How important is that to you you personally and your bandmates that you guys are able to, persevere because it's gonna take a while for you guys to really reach out and reach people?
It's really such an important thing. And I think part of what has made it easier for me is the fact that even in my career, I started out working for startup companies in Silicon Valley. Mm-hmm. Groups, startups in Silicon Valley, I used to tell people, are just like being in a rock band. You've got an idea. Everyone's really passionate about it. We don't know if it's going to sell. We don't know if it's going to be a huge success. If it is a success, it's going to take us a while to get there, but the long-term payoff might be really good.
Yeah.
But you have to have the ability to stick it out to get there.
Yep.
If all you want to do is be playing gigs, creating original music is not the path. Join a cover band. They are actively playing all the time, playing other people's music. Mm-hmm. But if you want to create art, that means being in an indie band. It's not all about the gigs. The gigs are critical when you're ready for them. But creating the art is the most important piece. Because without that, you don't have the gigs.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I mean, it was a pleasure having you on the podcast. I'll leave all the links down below for Dream Eternal Bliss. I mean, you guys, it seems like you have the right kind of mindset and you have the proper kind of way of getting on and, helping out with your business. And musicplayers.com, obviously, everyone go and look at that site. We wish you nothing but the best on here. I mean, if you have anything that you need us to ever plug, any like new songs or say your new album's coming out, definitely just let us know and I'll plug it like I did earlier in the podcast. And any shows too. Oh yeah, any shows that are coming up that you would like to plug right now.
No, right. The only one on the calendar is not till Columbus Day.
Oh, okay.
In the fall. Right now, we're now in rehearsals to start up the live shows again now that the album is done.
All right,
and you will be the first one to hear it.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I would love, just send me anything and then let me know when your shows are, and I will be more than happy to plug. But I mean, Scott, it was great having you on the podcast. You're more than welcome any other time on the show. And everyone, again, make sure Dream Eternal Bliss, check them out. They have some great tunes, and for everyone, especially people like me who love the old school type of music, they kind of have a little bit of vibe to that, and it's really something that I think that you would enjoy. So this is DD on the Spot, Ryan Johnson signing out. Everyone have a great day.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yep.